It's a love affair that began on October 15th, 1951. And 7 decades later, her legend continues to grow. We asked Jim Axelrod to find out why we still love Lucy.
On a Hollywood lot, where one of America's biggest stars ever first filmed her groundbreaking show, a young artist named Yolanda Glass has been hard at work.
One of the workers who came by, who worked on the lot, he looked up and he was like, "Lucy would be proud of this." I can't describe how encouraging that felt.
Yes, count this 30-something among the millions who 70 years after the premiere of I Love Lucy still love Lucy. Still love Lucille Ball stuffing her mouth to keep pace at Kramer's Candy.
So why don't you join the thousands of happy, peppy people and get a great big bottle of Mida.
Still love her getting drunk pitching a health tonic that's 23% alcohol. Still love her going mime for mime with Harpo Marx. Almost. And still find Lucy both relevant and influential.
There wouldn't be a myriad of the female and people of color who are comedians out right now without her foundation.
The 180 episodes over 6 seasons on CBS followed the madcap adventures of Lucy Ricardo and the trouble she whips up trying to break out of her mid-century middle-class life. Married to Cuban bandleader Ricky Ricardo, played by her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz.
Yes, I love Lucy, and Lucy loves me.
Nowhere is the hold the show still has on the public easier to see than in Jamestown, New York, where Lucille Ball was born 110 years ago, and where 2 museums celebrate I Love Lucy, featuring replicas of the show's iconic sets.
All I think about is the amount of extraordinarily well-done physical comedy that took place here.
This is so evocative.
Journey Gunderson is the executive director of both the Lucy-Desi Museum and the National Comedy Center.
70 years later, why is Lucille Ball still relevant?
I think in some ways, Lucille Ball's legacy can be appreciated now through a 2021 lens, perhaps better than it ever has been able to be appreciated.
Start with I Love Lucy's enormous popularity.
Ricky, this is it.
This is it.
The episode in which Lucy gave birth on January 19th, 1953, reached 44 million viewers.
That I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States.
That's 15 million more than the next day when Dwight Eisenhower was sworn in as our 34th president. Lucy and Desi marked new territory for television, still evolving as a cultural institution. She was the all-American girl. He was a Cuban-born transplant. For its time, controversial casting that Lucille Ball insisted on.
Oh, Ricky!
She risked everything.
Remember, this was more than a decade before the height of the civil rights movement.
I think America raised its eyebrows, but then they quickly started laughing.
Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz were TV pioneers in an impressive list of other ways as well. The laughter was so loud when they filmed, it was recorded and used for other shows, helping to launch canned laughter as a standard production technique. That show where she gave birth capped TV's first ever pregnancy plotline on a Big 3 network sitcom.
It was still taboo for a woman who was pregnant to be out in the open in front of everyone.
And when Lucy needed some time off post-delivery, Desi offered up a first that changed the Hollywood business model forever. Just repeat some episodes that had already aired.
Desi Arnaz, father of reruns?
Yes, and the story goes that CBS executives laughed at him and said, who's going to want to watch them after they aired?
It turned out everyone would, which is why 70 years later, Lucille and Desi are still cultural icons.
I care about what's funny.
The subject of that new Aaron Sorkin movie being the Ricardos with Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem.
No.
And a novel, The Queen of Tuesday, by Darin Strauss.
She was famous to a degree that hadn't existed before her, really.
While intrigued by her immense public appeal,
when they'd cut to commercial, the water tables would drop in the big cities because the entire country was going to the bathroom at the same time.
Strauss found her private pain most compelling.
Look at this face, though.
Yeah.
That's not acting.
Yeah, that's great, right? She and Desi were perfect together except for the fact that they weren't. She loved him, he loved her, and yet they couldn't live together.
On camera, Desi was an understanding, loving husband. Off camera, he was an alcoholic and a womanizer.
She knew she couldn't divorce him because that would let the country down. That's how powerful that bond was for us. It was like a civic bond.
In his novel, Strauss gives Lucy love in the form of an affair with his own grandfather.
And I wanted to give her a love story of her own. That's why I told the story in this way.
But that's fiction. The fact, Lucy and Desi did eventually divorce. Both remarried. But most poignantly,
If we asked her at the end of her life, who was the love of your life?
Desi Arnaz, absolutely.
At the root, they were connected by their souls. Yeah.
Kate Luckinbill agrees, and she should know.
We had a very special bond.
She's their granddaughter.
Your grandparents did remain in love until the end of their lives?
Uh-huh. Completely. Madly. Deeply.
Now the head of creative direction at Desilu, the studio founded by her grandparents. That's right. Years after I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball greenlit shows like Star Trek, The Untouchables, and The Twilight Zone. The keeper of the I Love Lucy flame.
There's a healing quality to that show. That's what I feel I'm here to do, is to remind people of the elixir that they brought the world.
Luckinbill is protective of the memory of her grandfather, who died in 1986 at the age of 69, and her grandmother, who died 3 years later from an aortic aneurysm at 77. But she also wants to look at them honestly.
Better we allow the illusion to move aside and let's deal with the reality.
Yeah. And why it's so important not to let people like that die in their 70s from a heart explosion and alcoholism. Because neither of them should have been gone. They died of sadness and trauma, both of them.
No Hollywood ending, perhaps, but what Lucy and Desi did give the world still has an extraordinary impact 70 years later.
That was like the first time I got to see a female being funny and silly and embarrassing, and it was cool.
Just ask this young artist.
I feel like when I was really little, there was this idea that you have to be polite and quiet as a woman. And when I watched her show, that was the first introduction of you don't have to be quiet. You could be funny, you could be loud, and it was okay.
And guess what? America's gonna love it.
Right, and they're gonna love it so much, we're gonna be on for decades. And people in my generation, the next generation, and the next generation are gonna know.